San Francisco's Archbishop Salvatore J. Cordileone recently announced that Speaker Nancy Pelosi would be ineligible for communion because she supports abortion rights. Now, I assume he meant that as a threat, but honestly, it is just petty and ridiculous for so many reasons. So I thought it would be useful to go through some of them. First, here's what he said. He explained in a letter that Pelosi's actions, basically defending a woman's right to control her own body, which is something she's believed for decades, suddenly amounted to a grave evil. And I just have to say, it's really hard to say all this with a straight face, because a Catholic Church official calling people evil is like the My Pillow guy calling you a conspiracy theorist. Like, really? You? I'm gonna read you part of the letter, but I hope you know how hard this is to do when your eyes keep rolling into the back of your head. After numerous attempts to speak with her to help her understand the grave evil she is perpetrating, the scandal she is causing, and the danger to her own soul she is risking, I have determined that the point has come in which I must make a public declaration that she is not to be admitted to Holy Communion unless and until she publicly repudiate her support for abortion rights and confess and receive absolution for her cooperation in this evil in the sacrament of penance. I have accordingly sent her a notification to this effect, which I have now made public. I think I'm most offended by rights being in quotation marks, as if forcing women to give birth is just the way it is. He also said in the letter that his actions were purely pastoral, not political. Sure, buddy. Look, this is supposed to be a big deal. A Catholic leader denying Pelosi access to the Eucharist bars her from fully participating in church life. She can't partake in one of the sacraments. That's a big problem if you're a Catholic, because sacraments are meant to be a way to deepen your relationship with God. I mean, I don't personally think it's a punishment, because the sacraments mean nothing to me, but who cares what I think? She's Catholic, they're important to her, and this Archbishop is blocking her chance to get closer to their shared God. He has the authority to do that. But is it a wise and sensible move? No. It's short-sighted and just a remarkable self-own. For starters, going after Pelosi for being pro-choice is laughable considering that Pope Francis didn't go that far when he met with Joe Biden last year. That was a controversy at one point. Would Biden, the Catholic president who supports public policies that the church rejects, be allowed to receive a communion wafer? A bunch of conservative bishops wanted the Pope to say no. But what happened during Biden's trip to Rome that year? Biden said the Pope told him he was a good Catholic and should keep receiving communion. The Vatican didn't deny any of that. So the Pope did not punish Joe Biden for his public position on abortion, but this Archbishop wants to go after Pelosi for hers. It's like the mayor of a town of 20 people acting like he's king. He is drunk with power. Like, calm down, Salvatore. Unless you want to admit no one should listen to anything the Pope says, which, hey, look, I'm fully on board with. It's also laughable because the Archbishop said this wasn't political. But of course it's political. Here's how I know this. You know who else is Catholic? Former Attorney General Bill Barr. Bill Barr told the Federal Bureau of Prisons to continue executing prisoners during the Trump administration. He wanted them to resume the death penalty. You know what the Catholic Church says about the death penalty? Pope Francis says it's an attack on the inviolability and dignity of the person, and said it's inadmissible in all cases. And you know what? He's right. But do you know how many conservative Catholic archbishops denied Bill Barr communion for violating church teachings? Zero. You know what they actually did? They invited Bill Barr to speak at the National Catholic Prayer Breakfast. And they gave him an award meant to highlight, and I am not kidding here, the good works of those who serve the church so well. They did that for a guy who brought back executions. Why? Because a whole bunch of Catholic leaders are partisan hypocrites who, let's be honest, do not actually care about life. You cannot support the death penalty and pretend to be pro-life. These people worship fetuses and Republicans and not women. So stop pretending Nancy Pelosi is the evil one when you said nothing about Bill Barr. Or even today, say nothing about Texas Governor Greg Abbott, who's also Catholic and pro-death and anti-refugee, and on the other side of everything Jesus supposedly stood for. Of course this is all political. It's also strange that this archbishop is going after Pelosi over abortion rights because the Catholic Church has no moral legs to stand on. A leader of an organization facilitating child sex abuse does not get to be an arbiter of morality. And by the way, sex abuse cases cost the Archdiocese of San Francisco $87 million in settlements. That's the Archdiocese that Cordileone manages. But, Nancy Pelosi wants women to receive health care, so I guess she's the horrible one. Even beyond that, this idea that pro-choice Catholics need to be sanctioned in some way is absurd when you consider just how many Catholics disagree with church doctrine on this matter. 56% of Catholics in the US say abortion should be legal in all or most cases. 68% of Catholics in the US do not want to see Roe v. Wade overturned. So if the church wants to punish people who support abortion in at least some situations, then please, by all means, kick them all out. Empty the pews. Tell them they're not welcome. Deny every single one of them communion. And get rid of everyone in the church who disagrees with any Catholic doctrine. But don't pick out one person and pretend she's the problem when you clearly do not apply that rule across the board. Seriously, are all the pro-choice Catholics in San Francisco gonna be denied communion? You'd lose damn near everyone. And what about the Catholics who get divorced? Do they get punished? No. And I would argue they shouldn't. But why is supporting abortion rights being treated as a crime worse than all the other things the church routinely ignores? If Cordileone really wanted to punish people who violate church teachings, he should look in the other direction of the Vatican hierarchy. Because promoting anti-LGBTQ bigotry and downplaying sex abuse is way worse than saying women deserve rights. And I know this is petty of me, and I'm just being a YouTube atheist for a minute, but can we all admit that this is, at its core, a baseless threat? It's like when evangelical Christians condemn atheists to hell. Like, it won't hurt me at all. But it sure says a lot about you. This entire controversy revolves around whether priests can put what they believe is a literal piece of Jesus's body in someone's mouth via a tasteless wafer. I know Pelosi takes it seriously because she's Catholic, but the rest of us should not ignore the utter bizarreness of the ritual just because we're used to hearing about it. The Archbishop is punishing Pelosi by taking away a thing Catholics just made up a long time ago. Part of me thinks this will all backfire. Because by punishing Pelosi for taking what is honestly the morally correct position, the Catholic Church may end up pushing more young people away from the institution. After all, why would anyone want to be a member of a club that condemns someone for protecting women, especially poor women and women of color? You think the church's continued opposition to marriage equality has helped them win over young people? No. And this is no different. And of all the people who could be delivering this pronouncement, it's not like Cordileone is the right messenger. I know he oversees her local church, but still, this is a guy who previously denounced homosexuality, same-sex marriage, and in vitro fertilization as gravely evil. Happy gay couples and a scientific procedure to help people have a baby are evil. He didn't say that about sex abuse. One newspaper columnist said he regularly preaches a message of exclusion and hate. Here's the kicker. This guy fought against a California law that extended the statute of limitations for victims of child sex abuse to file lawsuits. The state wanted to give victims more time to get justice for what happened to them decades ago because it can take time to process and work up the courage to call out your assailant. And this archbishop, this guy who's now pretending to take some moral high ground, was like, why are we being nice to victims? They shouldn't be allowed to come after priests after some arbitrary expiration date. I mentioned Bill Barr earlier. In 2021, when the church was debating whether Biden should receive communion, dozens of Catholic Democrats, led by Representative Rosa DeLauro of Connecticut, published an open letter urging the church not to punish people who disagreed about abortion. They basically said God will judge their actions, so the priests should not. They didn't want communion to be used as some political weapon. There's one section I really want you to hear. We believe the separation of church and state allows for our faith to inform our public duties and best serve our constituents. The sacrament of Holy Communion is central to the life of practicing Catholics, and the weaponization of the Eucharist to Democratic lawmakers for their support of a woman's safe and legal access to abortion is contradictory. No elected officials have been threatened with being denied the Eucharist as they support and have supported policies contrary to the church teachings, including supporting the death penalty, separating migrant children from their parents, denying asylum to those seeking safety in the United States, limiting assistance for the hungry and food insecure, and denying rights and dignity to immigrants. She is absolutely right. The church never cares when Republican Catholics use their power to hurt people, even when it directly contradicts church teachings. But when Democrats support women's rights, it's suddenly a five-alarm fire. No one should be taking lessons on ethics from a moral monster just because he has Archbishop in front of his name. When you botch the simplest moral questions ever, even if those pronouncements are based on Catholic teachings, you should keep your damn mouth shut when it comes to complicated issues you don't understand. And I promise you, the Catholic leaders who have never been with a woman are not qualified to control one. Not that she'll do it, but I would love to see Pelosi wear this rejection like a badge of honor. I want to see her use it in political ads in order to win over more voters in swing districts. Like, you're damn right the Catholic Church denied me communion. That's how strong my party is on personal freedom. If you don't want Ted Cruz and the Pope between your legs, vote for Democrats. All of this, by the way, is happening while a different Catholic made news recently for saying in an interview that if she had the power, she would criminalize birth control for everyone in her state because that's what the Catholic Church teaches. Jackie Eubanks is running for the Michigan State House. What she said is far worse than Pelosi defending abortion rights. But the Catholic Church will never condemn Eubanks for fantasizing about shoving her faith in everyone's faces. They only want to punish the politicians trying to help people. This is what happens when a religion elevates fetuses over women. This is what happens when a religious institution controlled entirely by men insists on controlling women's bodies as a matter of faith. This is what happens when an archbishop who's never had sex uses his power to punish women who become pregnant against their will. Or, in some cases, had something go horribly wrong during pregnancy. Or, in other cases, who cares? It's nobody else's business. There are plenty of things you can criticize Nancy Pelosi about. I have a very long list. This, however, this is not one of them. The problem is not Pelosi. The problem is the Catholic Church and anyone who takes its leader seriously on issues where they've never taken the thoughtful, compassionate approach. Their obsession with fertilization leads to them ignoring all the circumstances surrounding birth. And if you've ever been a potential parent, you know how much those circumstances matter when it comes to having a child. To punish a politician for acknowledging that some people may have less than ideal circumstances, while at the same time condemning birth control, all rules pushed by a bunch of guys who, by definition, cannot get married or have sex or have babies, shows you why you should never trust the Catholic Church when it comes to anything involving reproduction. I mean, if you're gonna lash out against someone for being pro-choice, I think you should at least start off by explaining what an ectopic pregnancy is, or how an IUD works, or how it's inserted, or what Plan B does. Or, you know what? Just accurately label an anatomical illustration of a woman's body down there. Let's take bets on how this Archbishop would do. But look, nothing will change unless more Catholics in positions of power condemn Cordileone's move. Or unless Catholics who just go to church because they think it's the right thing to do finally leave for good. Because they're the ones propping up this institution with their bodies and their money. The church won't care about women's rights unless it hurts their bottom line. Meanwhile, on Sunday, Nancy Pelosi went to a Catholic church in Washington, D.C., because that's where she usually is, and guess what? She got communion. So even after all the drama this week, at least one Catholic priest decided he wasn't gonna play the political game. So much for one archbishop's protest.